Hello and welcome to the X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Today we're going to be discussing a fascinating, unsettling, study, findings from a study from digital transformation consultancy called Adaptivist. Did I pronounce that correct, Neil?
That's exactly correct. Yeah,
Okay, we're on a
Mm,
good, on a good track here. Okay.
that's absolutely right.
The company's report is titled Human Costs of Digital Transformation and reported high levels of quote unquote techno stress, which describes a person's feelings of being overwhelmed by constant connectivity, the pressure to keep up with new tools and platforms, and cognitive overload from notifications and information. According to their study, which surveyed 4,000 knowledge workers from the US, UK, Canada, and Germany, techno stress is rife in workplaces around the world. And I should say that the CEO of HR.com, this came across her desk, her inbox, and she immediately sent it to me. And I said, yes, we got to have Neil on. So, Neil, thanks so much. I do appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure to join you. And yeah, we're really excited to share some of the things that we found out and some of the areas where we're investigating further as to where this techno stress is starting to arise and things that you can do to sort of mitigate this and actually address some of these pretty serious challenges that we're seeing around the world.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. I should formally introduce you, Neil Riley, innovation lead from the aforementioned adaptivist group. So it was interesting in our lead up to this, we were just talking a little bit about your background, how you came to this work.
Yeah.
Um, you led something of a peripatetic life. Don't ask me to try pronouncing that a second time because I'm sure I'd
We'll put it
butcher it.
into ChatGPT later.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, give us a little bit of background. It's kind of interesting how you came to doing this technology work.
Yeah, so I get started in the world of work as a dishwasher. So I think my work very much started in the University of Alabama, which is where I got my degree. I'm a child of a military professional, so I'm a child of an air helicopter pilot, and my lovely mother is a maths teacher, which is how you say maths in the UK.
Of
Now that I've lived here
course,
for 10 years, as you do, you
of
got to
course,
acclimate.
of course.
Indeed. But I get my start in the culinary arts and in music. So when I'm in the University of Alabama, I'm working nights in kitchens, and during the day, I was part of the New College program, which is very much like the New School at NYU, where you can design a degree based on the skills and the background that you've had. And Jim Hall, if you by God see
The
this today, I
guitarist,
still love
jazz
you.
guitarist.
Different guy. But
Oh, okay.
James Hall was the leader of the New College, and just absolutely incredible. Um, I get my start in technology and knowledge work as a support engineer. So I make my way to Silicon Valley in the early 2010s, and I'm working at an art school doing sort of online art education, things like this. And I find my way into this little company at the time called Atlassian, which ended up being a multi-billion-dollar organization, and it's been an ecosystem that I've had the pleasure of working in both inside of Atlassian and outside in the partner Adaptivist, which is where we're working now. But yeah, I've been all over different kinds of technology enabled functions and roles. When I was in San Francisco, I actually had the opportunity to work as a technical instructor teaching artists how to code, which has been one of like my favorite sort of deep dives into the different ways that people engage with their work, the different kinds of brains that come out. The artistic and creative brain has many different flavors, but when you inject technology into this equation, you find yourself where people who are quite creative can do just completely insane, magical things that otherwise they would never be able to do. So
And now, of course, they can just vibe.
most of that
Now,
growth,
yeah, yeah. Now
yeah.
they can just vibe code.
Well, that's it. That's it. And the reality is, vibe coding and this kind of stuff, people have been copy pasting for a very long time. I think the AI revolution and the vibe coding revolution is one that I'm uniquely passionate about because I've been a heavy user of. There's this piece of software called MaxMSP. They're made by Cycling 74, which is another organization based out of Silicon Valley. Their whole thing was you're able to build synthesizers and these very complex music instruments by dragging objects on a whiteboard and linking them together. this kind of whiteboard problem of getting started and getting off the ground with an idea is one of the hardest challenges in any creative industry, be it arts or be it classic business. And I think vibe coding is an interesting one because what it does is it gets you over a lot of these hurdles where you think you're not able to go to that next step and get those next things in front of you. But these technologies can actually help you along this journey rather than simply replacing everything that you're doing. But yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing these podcasts for a number of years, predating the X Factor, and I find when I speak to people, very few have a very linear career path. A lot of happy accidents, or maybe sometimes not so happy accidents, but very few are as alinear, if that's a word, than yours. So it's really interesting. I appreciate this.
I'm going to put it on a t-shirt.
Yes, alinear.
Yeah.
But in any case, so tell me about Adaptivist and what you do with them.
Yeah, so Adaptivist is founded going on more than 15 years ago. So Adaptivist is an organization that does technology and solutions for businesses around the world. That comes in a number of different flavors. A lot of the work that we do is technical implementation, custom development, augmenting the way that people work with technical backgrounds. We also have a very significant consultancy arm focused on practices like DevOps, work management, ITSM, Agile. We're in quite a lot of the Fortune 500 today, helping organizations adapt the way that they're working to the challenges that they're facing. Our growth comes quite significantly, though, through ecosystems. And it's been one of the passions of my career is trying to build healthy technology and other kinds of ecosystems. Specifically in this context, when I mean ecosystem, I'm using the phrase in a technological way. So the biggest ones of Adaptivist are ecosystems like the Atlassian ecosystem, which is a significant one for us, AWS, Monday.com, GitLab, a lot of these tools and platforms that businesses are relying on right now, the technology that they're investing in to be competitive, but don't necessarily know the best ways to adapt their ways of working to using them or getting the most out of how these systems can actually work and improve the way businesses work today.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Appreciate this. So, to the report, I'm curious, did you come with this premise or, the human cost of digital transformation, or did that just sort of emerge?
Yeah. So as an organization like ours, when you're involved in sometimes multi-million dollar engagements trying to help organizations go through digital transformations or really transformations of many different types, you can imagine agile and ways of working transformations being significantly important without necessarily incorporating a technological element. What we've been noticing over recent years, and a lot of this has come since COVID and since the introduction of this Gen AI explosion, we've been noticing a trend of an increase in stressors and problem areas that are arising in businesses that anecdotally were telling us, there's something really important here. There's something going on that is different than what we've seen 15 or 20 years ago. And so we did have some kind of a thought that there's worthwhile investment in going in and trying to not just anecdotally but analytically understand what are these drivers that are causing some of these businesses to seem like they're having much more challenging environments or setups than they would have had 10 or 15 years ago, but also to try to understand some of the success stories and where those are coming from as well, because we are also seeing people who we are calling, there's the techno stress problem, but there's also a group of organizations that are experiencing what we're calling techno joy. They are adapting to these tools in a very significant and powerful way. And so what we were trying to understand is some of these underlying drivers. You can imagine an organization like ours needs to know this kind of thing to be able to do the best work that we can. But also, we're just really fascinated to understand what this changing landscape looks like and just trying to get a handle on where all of these different technological improvements, where Gen AI and where a lot of these other elements play their role. And so, yeah, we definitely had an idea that something was up, but
Yeah.
analytically, we didn't have anything.
Is technostress your coinage?
Technostress actually is used other places. I was looking this up to try to find the lineage of this word because it's an interesting portmanteau of the stressors of a business, right?
I thought I
Those
was the
two
only
can
one
go.
who's allowed to use big words in this podcast.
Portmanteau is one of my favorite words to do. I think we had it in a crossword, the wife and I, the other day.
Oh,
Um, the The technology introduction of this stress, there's not really a clear definition for this, but ours, the way that we're defining this is one of if the stressors of an organization have a technological underpinning, if the tools or if the way that technology in general is playing a role in the stressor, we're identifying that as technostress. In in its complement or its opposite, Technojoy follows the exact same line. If technology is playing a role in the reasons why you're doing well or you're adapting well to your job, then we're calling it in this context. Um, what we're seeing, it's a really interesting. The report has come back with some really interesting findings, which is
Yeah, I want
two
to get to that.
thirds.
I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to.
yeah.
I don't
You
mean
want to
to.
do that? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And by the way, is Technojoy your coinage? Because I've not seen that.
I think I had not seen anyone use the phrase technojoy. I think the only ones that I've ever seen are the ones used as technostress. So technojoy and technostress are the ones that we've coined specifically in this context to describe the complement across each one of these areas and the opposite, the opposing forces, for lack of a
Oh,
better phrase.
okay. Yeah. And again, I do want to get into the report, obviously, but just one question before we get there about the report itself. I mentioned the sample size. You surveyed 4,000 knowledge workers from the US, UK, Canada, and Germany. Um, any more specifics on the nature of the companies, the size of those companies, and over what span of time you conducted the survey?
We did a very short run survey. It was running about a month. We were using A Test, which is one of the platforms that we use to do this kind of wide range of survey. We've had a lot of success with them in the past. Um, we only looked at organizations and individuals who identify as knowledge workers. So this spans quite a breadth of different roles and different backgrounds. You can imagine IT professionals all the way to accountants can be considered as a knowledge worker in this context. We have a pretty good split across organizations of different sizes. We did get quite a lot of survey responses from people who identify as working in large organizations all the way down to mom and pop shops, small businesses that are utilizing knowledge work in some kind of capacity. So we were trying to get a pretty good breadth to understand whether or not the underlying drivers that we were identifying have effects across a lot of these different areas. What I can tell you is across the board, our findings seem to be relatively aligned across no matter what kind of business that you're dealing with, which tells us that technology in and of itself is playing an interesting underlying driving role as opposed to enterprise technology or technology that is only focused on HR professionals or only focused on
Right.
accountants, for lack of a better phrase.
Right. All right. So the findings. What are some of the more salient findings?
So the thing that really surprised me, right? Because as I mentioned, we have this anecdotal evidence. We've definitely been hearing from the field when our groups who are coming back and describing how these organizations are working and what they're struggling with. That big two-thirds finding I was mentioning earlier, they say that knowledge workers are saying that technology has negatively impacted their work life directly. So that's two out of three,
Now,
right? Which
technology
is
broadly defined.
technology broadly defined. And
Okay.
in this context, most of the questions that we were focusing was around not just, the technology in one's home. It is those technological involvements that are either something that you use every day or something that you use every day in the context of business. But in general, this is just technology as a whole. Two-thirds are saying it's negatively impacting their work life specifically, and 27% are regularly experiencing what we're calling digital overwhelm. So this is defined as either notification overload. You're bombarded by 95 different emails a day. Your phone is going off all the time, or it is also involving things like the amount of tools that you're using, the spread of where you're supposed to be doing work across many different platforms and many different areas. But two thirds of people experiencing this kind of negative thing was huge. One third saying that it is overwhelming, nearly one third saying it's overwhelming, was just a really interesting and sort of startling bit of data that we found. The thing that we found really interesting, though, was that when you take that number, those people are saying that it's negatively actively affecting their work life. 73% of people came back and said they believe technology has helped advance their careers. And so you have this interesting dichotomy of people who are struggling day to day with the power of this technology, which is to say the breadth, the scope, the scale of this technology as it impacts their daily life. But 75%, nearly are saying that it's actually advancing their career, and it's something that they're utilizing across their career journey, which
You
is
know,
crazy.
it's crazy, but it's kind of interesting. I am
Yeah.
going to be having a podcast in about a week's time. And the central premise of it, and there are two clinical psychologists who are going to be talking about, they're talking about ambivalence as it relates to AI. And there clearly is, based on the conversation I've had with them, a clinical definition of ambivalence. You and I, as non-clinical people, view it as well. People are kind of indifferent, but no, really, from a clinical perspective, it's uh, managing several opposing views, not necessarily reconciling them, but sort of trying to keep them in balance. So on the one hand, you can feel great anxiety, but on the other hand, you can also feel that it's been a net positive in your job. So
That's right.
they may seem to be opposed and contradictory, mutually exclusive, but no, that's not always the case. So we're going to have that conversation next week. So I'm really looking
I
forward
look
to that.
forward to it. I really look forward to it. You're right. And it was interesting to us too that with these two things seemingly on the surface in conflict, but you're right, actually being able to exist in this combined pattern. The thing that really impacted us and the thing that concerned us the most was the 43% who have come back from the survey and said that they are suffering some form, be it moderate to severe or even lesser, of some stress or anxiety from the overload and the platform juggling that they're experiencing. And that was the one where we took a pause and a think about it, because you know the fact that you have nearly half of the people that we're surveying coming back and going, well, this technology is really powerful. It is something that we can absolutely use to further our careers. It is something that is fully engaged in our work life, but that is causing us a level of anxiety in the working world. Right. That is something that needs changing. That is something that needs some serious time and some serious focus.
Yeah, I'm quoting here from the report. Digital
Mm.
communication at work is another source of angst, with 18% saying colleagues' communications makes them feel incompetent, excluded, or disliked. So it seems that here's sort of another bifurcation in a way. On the one hand, it's communications. I mean, we're not even necessarily talking about competence. I mean, they may go hand in glove, but not necessarily. So it's obviously the frequency of communications. You talked about when you did this survey, you didn't necessarily draw the line at technology at work or technology at life, because let's face it, all these days it's all one big blob. It's one big undifferentiated thing. And I'm assuming that is part of the problem, because you could never quite get away with it. You have this notion that you have this flexibility. You could work at home, you could work in the office or in a hybrid way, but there's no work is going to find you.
It's an interesting one because in my career, as we mentioned, I've done quite a lot of jobs. I was the Adaptivist Group, so the parent company of Adaptivist and its many brands. I was the Adaptivist Group CIO when COVID hits, right? And we are an organization that I would say I was very proud of the way that we were able to manage and keep moving and keep growing. We actually acquired two businesses throughout the time of COVID, to give you an idea as to like where we were sitting. One of the reasons that we were able to do that is Adaptivist is an organization from the very beginning, before it even had its parent company, that everybody by default was remote. Just the nature of running a consultancy in the UK at that time, was kind of the easiest way to do it. And it was the best way to do it for there. So we had a really good etiquette when it came to how you run a remote business, right? And so there was a lot of pretty good practices that we had in place that became kind of commonplace for everyone who was joining, and it was part of people's onboarding to handle how you're communicating with a lot of these tools. When COVID hits, and I would say the Gen AI explosion is a further accelerant of this kind of problem area. A lot of people didn't really have that kind of etiquette built in, because the way they worked didn't require them to operate in these like digital only domains, right? These remote first or remote only domains. We actually, over the past 5 years, have put out a number of different reports called the Digital Etiquette Reports, and it's a sister research based, or a sibling research based on the one that we're talking about here. But it's all around sort of how organizations are trying to adapt to these different ways that people work, but also how they communicate so that people feel included. You feel you're able to incorporate everybody's, in the way that they work, the way that what they're bringing to the equation, and you try to stop some of these accidental, in 99.9% of cases, of people making people feel unheard, unrepresented, or just feeling like, I'm not part of this group because of the way that they're being communicated with. It's actually a really, really hard problem if you don't have some of those fundamentals in place. And a lot of people, I think, a lot of organizations suffered through COVID, not least of which for all the other things that COVID brought to the equation. But one of the sort of underrepresented problems that people were coming across is, I actually don't know how to communicate in Slack or Teams the way that I would communicate with people in my daily life. You come into a room and you hit at all, and you basically spam 1,000 people's worth of a channel. It's the equivalent of walking in an office and shouting over the office, "I am here." Okay, we know. You know what I mean? It's a learning exercise because it's a skill that not everybody has, right? And so yeah, it's definitely a huge problem.
Has AI introduced another set of problems?
A- AI has introduced all sorts of challenges and opportunities at once. And I know it's one of those answers that kind of feels a bit wishy-washy, but we I've been following quite a lot of the sort of AI influencer, the AI education space, and a lot of these kinds of things. I have found that there's one guy who does a really good job of this, and he's called Sanjeet Paul Chowdhury. He wrote this book called Reshuffled. I don't know if you've come across it before, but
Yep.
his take on this is the one that I quote all the time, which is around AI's introduction. Most people think of AI as a tool that can do things like summarizing things, automating work, whatever. AI is actually a coordinating tool. AI's power comes from its ability to coordinate work, not just replace work. And this kind of power introduces all kinds of challenges, right? Because what ends up happening when these tools come into play is the way that you were doing business before, suddenly parts of that business gets accelerated. A lot of code can be written a lot faster than it was before. You can start pushing things through pipelines. So the coordination of this work becomes instantly and imminently important, because you have to be able to adapt to these different speeds and changes happening while keeping the quality bar high, and while keeping all of the other constraints that you want of your business to be in place. If you don't have any of those coordinating functions working in your organization, or if you're suffering from not being able to get all of this work into a place where you can adapt to all of these different changes, AI introduces so many challenges. Not for lack of trying to do the right thing either. It's not like you have a bunch of people who are trying to vibe code their jobs every day or replace their work. Rarely are we seeing this is the case. What ends up happening is the organization isn't able to adapt to a changing landscape of what that world of work looks like once you have non-human intelligences as part of the organizational principle and the organizational fabric. And so, yeah, there are all kinds. We're seeing all sorts of new challenges and ways that AI is changing the landscape every single day across every single industry.
Yeah. Have you seen a situation where, because I've actually seen this, I've experienced this, where, using a tool such as Chat GPT or any of its brethrens,
Yep.
you have people who all of a sudden have skills, sort of like these prosthetic skills that they don't have, they've never been trained for these things, and now they're encroaching in other areas. So they're coming into these meetings, perhaps with a document or what have you. Thanks, of course, to the good offices of ChatGPT, and they're producing things that they otherwise couldn't do, and they're stepping on toes, creating some real tensions in the organization. Is that anecdotal, or is that happening with greater frequency?
It's not anecdotal. It comes from a real place. What I would say is that we actually just had this problem today. Your timing is really good. We were talking about the challenge of people in an organization who are technically minded without technical training, coming in and starting to do vibe coding, for lack of a better phrase, of introducing code into an ecosystem without having any of the core understanding of the basics of what you would learn going through a longer story. I like to equate it this way. My cooking metaphor is a good one here. Somebody who doesn't necessarily understand the science of food can take a recipe and follow a recipe and know how to make a cake, right? You won't necessarily understand how the explosion of the different molecules makes this kind of souffle or this kind of thing a different cake or better. All of that comes from experience. But what you have, unfortunately, with people who use any of these AI tools without understanding the core, they can hyper accelerate down a line of something that normally would have been out of reach for them to be able to learn on their own. And they can become quite cogent or quite responsive in this place without having the core. We do see this happen. What ends up happening in these situations, though, is as long as there's an organizational structure, a collaboration, and a communication structure where someone feels comfortable talking about the new thing that they learned, you have a course correcting or a self correcting mechanism that comes out where people who are trained in these areas going, oh my God, you want to learn the thing that I learned. That's great. Here's the thing that you need to know. This isn't accurate because, and you take them back and you give them 5 more keywords. The same power that any one of these AI tools, ChatGPT or otherwise, will give you to be able to hyper accelerate also is the same tool that you can use to backfill all the knowledge you didn't have. I was actually going through this. I've set myself a goal to write things in new language. I'm a self-taught technical guy. So I've set myself a goal to write something in Go, a language that I've tried to use in the past, and I'm just, frankly, at the time, too stupid to be able to get the most out of. And what I find myself doing is going through these fits and starts of, oh, we'll accelerate pretty quick. But then I'll hit a snag going, well, based on everything that I've just been taught by ChatGPT, this should have been a lot easier to do. Hang on. And I just slowly work myself backwards and I work myself backwards until I understand the core. I was literally doing this last night on an example repo in GitHub, and I realized that the repo in question basically was trying to accelerate me down a path of something I didn't actually want to build. I learned something through that whole time. Did I throw away the code? Absolutely, because it wasn't useful. But the thing that came out now is a knowledge that I would have never had because I couldn't even get onto the dance floor. I couldn't even get to a place where I could actually play, right? And play is the most important thing, getting people down that lines.
That is a great point, play. I want to get to that in a second. By the way, I was going to ask you how your culinary background informs your technology work. So you anticipated that, and I really do appreciate that. And
That's
and
fun.
and play is a really. I'm glad you brought that up,
Mm.
because my first experience with ChatGPT, and I have to say I was kind of an early adopter of that. I'm not always an early adopter of these things, but I was there. Um, and I've been following AI for quite a number of years. My first approach to it was, as far as kicking the tires, was just play with it. And I mean, and I use the word in a literal sense. So I throw all of these crazy prompts at it. So take some scenes from a bunch of movies and turn the dialogue into Elizabethan English. You know, you rent my heart, Fredo.
Yeah,
Twas you, Fredo. Twas you, Fredo. You rent my heart.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
have
exactly.
Tony
Exactly.
Soprano, being interviewed for a job at an auto dealership. You know, all these crazy things. Take an IKEA manual and turn it into a haiku poem. You know, all this stuff. And in the spirit of play and in the process of play, you know, you realize the power of the tool. You also realize the limitations. And you know, you talk about techno stress, the spirit of play. It would be kind of interesting to structure something where the organization could take a more systematic approach and use that spirit of play, that spirit of inquiry, to work through maybe some of the anxieties, to find for yourself what these tools can do, how you can use those tools.
It's true. The other thing I'd say is we go to organizations all the time trying to get them to be able to be more innovative, more agile is where a lot of these conversations come out. And what you come to find is I was a culinary guy, I was also a lifeguard, had a lot of jobs. Nobody wants to learn how to swim when they're drowning, right? No one has fun playing in the pool if you feel like you can't get your feet under you and you can't tread above water. And I think one of the things that these AI tools will help you do if you can engage with them in this way, if you can treat them with this level of reverence, but also lack of respect, insofar as, I mean, like, this is not intelligence in the way that a human brain works. Really, you could call this differential equations mapped into a new domain. Right? It's human language turned into a compiler that makes it so that it can transpile it into any format that you want. That is in no way making another human, nor is it making God in the same way that people describe in Silicon Valley sometimes, the way that these tools work. So if you can treat it with that healthy disrespect, all of a sudden these things become a lot easier to use because they're just a tool. They're a communicative tool. They're a tool that can certainly sound like Shakespeare because it's ingested everything that he's ever made. But those organizations who, or those individuals in an organization who are suffering from a lot of these stressors that we're talking about, never get the opportunity to get the most out of these things. And this was, I think, the most interesting finding of the research that we were doing. You know, organizations who invest in making sure that you have the best relationship of employee to tool, of employee to team, and help giving people time to be able to take a step back and think about these things and take a step back and actually just go play with some of the ideas about the way that they work. These are the groups who are going cross that techno stress boundary and into technojoy. And none of those things are technical problems, right? They're all organizational. They're all human.
Yeah, I was again, you anticipated I was going to ask you really my final question: how do we get from techno stress to techno joy? And by the way, I love that term, healthy disrespect. I think I'm going to have to work that into the title of this somehow. I think that's really, really good. Um,
It's true.
but what does techno joy look like?
Yeah. Techno joy, people who are experiencing the most from technology, the ones who are able to move past or move beyond this sort of onslaught of technology and the way it comes in. A, a lot of this comes from intentional decisions about the tools and the ways that you're working with these technologies, being smart about what tools you're bringing in, which ones you're not, what your organization actually needs, what your team needs. And the biggest driver that we see right now, the ones that are actually making the most success, are people being very organizations being very, very clear about what their goals are, why they exist, what their purpose is, and how every single member of that organization plays their part in small or in gross, right? You want to be able to make sure that you can tie up, well, this little thing that I'm doing over here, I think it's helping this over here, but if I don't know where those linchpins happen, where those connective tissue happens, what you end up doing is you're spinning in a circle and you're putting a flurbit into a widget, and you don't get to see that big picture. One of the things that I've seen, my tech career starts in the 21st century, right? I come into the world right about the early 2000s, right after I'm leaving university. And one thing that I've seen about the 21st century that I think is different, as far as I can tell from the 20th, is people in organizations, because we have this wealth of information at our hands, right? I'm luckily a kid who grew up before a cell phone. I know what that world was like. And I see now people who you have the wealth of all knowledge in your hand now in the form of ChatGPT. So it can talk like Shakespeare, it can talk like a pirate, right? These people who grow up in this world, they want to, and they have the ability, the capacity to understand. They want to know what your organization is doing. Are you responsible? How are you addressing the challenges of the world? And they want to feel like that's part of their story as well, which I think is really powerful. It's a really, really powerful tool if you can draw that linkage. There are ways to do this with technology, right? We as adaptivists in our daily practices, this is our bread and butter of how we're trying to make that technology match how the business works and how these things link together. But any organization of any type, being able to do that is really, really important. The other thing is just introducing technology where it fits and not where it's not. The onslaught of notifications from a lot of these systems, which we see as a huge challenge and a huge problem, and it came out in the report as this as well, a lot of this just comes from misconfiguration, right? You do not need to know every single thing when it happens, but the things that you do need to know, you need to be aware of when they happen. And that balance is individual as much as it is organization specific about how everyone needs to be involved, where they need to be taking action, how that work is coordinated, as we were talking about before, and where people can frankly just ignore all of the actions going on in an organization that don't involve them. It's that kind of intentional play and that kind of intentional structuring that gives people the best opportunity to cross that chasm over into Technojoy from Technostress.
Excellent. Excellent. Well done. Well done. What are you working on now?
I mean, we as a business are doing so much. We as a group of businesses. I am the AI innovation lead for the group, which is a role that I'm very, very happy that Simon, our CEO, has allowed me to step into. But the other role that I'm working on right now is one called Saleable. I'm the general manager of that business, which is a startup inside of our larger group that we've been running for some time, and we're focusing at the moment on how people do commerce, how they do business with each other in this digital landscape, and what that looks like when organizations are trying to adapt to all these different ways and tools that you can sell to people, and making sure that you have the right commercial model, the right structure in place, and making it easy for people vibe coding all the way to doing very serious large marketplaces and ecosystems, having all the tools that they need in order to actually do business together. It's been a really, really fun ride doing startups again, as I had done in the world in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. But yeah, that's the passion project at the moment, is trying to help organizations, frankly, diversify and helping people, quit their jobs and start a business. Which every time you see somebody do that is just like a really, really powerful moment, because you see the happiness of someone's face on taking the autonomy and becoming a small business owner for the first time. I would not trade that for the world.
Technojoy.
Heck, no joy.
Technojoy. But I really do. Now, just last question.
Sure.
Now you are based in the UK, or is the organization primarily there? Where are you all over the
Yeah,
world?
where are we at?
And
Yes. Yeah, we're all over the world. So I'm based in the UK. Our saleable business is based in the UK. Our headquarters is in Norwich in the UK, which is where our co-founders, myself and our co-founder, start. The Adaptivist Group is headquartered out of the UK. We're headquartered out of London, but we are globally distributed. So we are major areas like Germany. We're in Spain. We're in the UK. We're in the US. Our America's headquarters is actually in Toronto in Canada, and we're as far west as Australia and as far east as the Ukraine right now. So we're pretty wide geographic distribution. When I took the CIO job, we were at 136 people, and Simon, our CEO, asked me to get us to 1,000 globally distributed. I was able to do that in 4 years, which
wow,
was really an impressive feat. It's something. It's probably the biggest transformation of people that I've done in my career. Um, but yeah, we're all over the place. But the UK is where I like to call home, the wife and I.
excellent, excellent. Neil, I really do appreciate when this report came in over the transfer. I said we got to have him on and talk
Nice.
about this. Excellent. And the link is in the description. I highly recommend you check it out. Check out Adaptivist's work. They're doing great stuff. And I'm going to have you back.
Would love that. Would absolutely love that. And we really appreciate the time. And yes, we're very, very excited to have everybody have a chance to read it and look forward to the next ones that are coming out.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil.